Hey, welcome back to the Fleet Success Show. I'm your host, Josh Turley. And today we're marking the 200th episode of the Fleet Success Show, which is quite the accomplishment. Big shout out to all the people behind the scenes that help make this show possible. And keeping it going for 200 episodes. This is a special one. We recorded this year while we were at RTA Connect 2025 and did it with a live studio audience, which is always fun. And did it more of a panel discussion with, you had Mark, Steve, and myself up there asking or answering questions from our crowd. So hope you enjoy this one. Definitely a special moment. I wanted to give a big shout out to all of our listeners for all the long years of loyalty and support you've given us. And with that, let's get into the show. This is a Fleet Success Show, dedicated to helping you and your fleet succeed using the experience of fleet professionals and Hall of Fame fleet legends. The show that explores how the pillars of stakeholder satisfaction, intentional culture, resource efficiency, and risk management all combine to lead your fleet to success. We're glad you're here. Now, let's get into the show.
I wanted to get some topics from you guys. What's something that you'd love to hear us talk about on the podcast? Walk through our process a little bit. And then just kind of do some reflection on things we've learned, things we've gone through over the last several years. As we've done 200 episodes, publishing weekly. That almost comes out to almost 4 years. Not quite, but pretty darn close. Mm-hmm. So it's been quite the journey. But with that, I think let's get into the show.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so a little behind the scenes of how this process works. We literally walk into a room just like this, and we say, Mark, what do you want to talk about today? So audience, what do you guys want to talk about today? What's on your mind?
So with the podcast stuff, because we're getting one started, how do you guys keep that flow going when your schedules are varied and everyone's located everywhere? How do you just keep that pressure and momentum?
That's a great question.
Yeah, so one is you have to have it on the calendar, right? So we book a time on the calendar. I think ours is every Friday at 1 p.m. If we don't get an episode, then we have to do 2 the next week. The way that we've figured out how to really get ahead of it is to get ahead of it. And so we'll pre-record several episodes. And then that way, if one of us is out, we have a meeting come up, there's a conflict, we have a little bit of buffer, but not so much that the content is stale by the time it gets released. So we try to get ahead of it that way, but we always make time for it. And so part of this is prioritization. For us, this is an important part of how we go to market, how we talk about ourselves, how we get our brand out there. So we make sure that it's a priority for us. But we have it on the schedule. And then if Mark and I can't do it, one of us can try to do it. And then we pull in people remotely. I mean, we've obviously got a stable of talent. So we love getting them all on the podcast. I will tell you, I guess from my personal experience, I love the in-person. You guys can probably feel that if you ever watch the YouTube video or you listen to it. You can tell when Mark and I are in studio versus when you have like a remote guest.
Yep.
And a lot of that's just because the speed at which we can communicate is, way faster. There's a lot less latency, and there's just a chemistry.
Yeah, and the cues and like facial cues. When someone's almost done speaking or not. It's just a lot easier, I think.
Just like that, a very seamless handoff. You can kind of like somebody takes. We would call it it's the hesitation breath. It's
right.
Like you can tell they're just about to say something, and they want to come in, and so I'll kind of tee it off to the point that I'll let it hang and let somebody else jump on and grab it.
Yeah. And let's give a shout out to our marketing team too, to be honest. Obviously Steve and Josh started this and they were doing everything from scratch. I mean, Josh is like, he's the sound guy, he's the planner, he was doing everything. He really kind of owned it. But over time, he slowly kind of handed that off more and more. And now we have the benefit of, great folks out there, Kelly and Ryan and Chris and others who kind of keep us on task, make sure that we're thinking about it. If we haven't recorded in a while, hey guys, you haven't recorded in a while. We need a few now. We need 2 or 3, and I think that helps a lot too.
Well, I think I learned a lot too.
Accountability.
Yeah.
Learned a lot over the years. I mean, just the quality is just so much different. The sound is so much different. Josh went through all kinds of different iterations.
We did a lot of R&D on equipment.
Yeah.
There's some trash equipment out there. But we started as some of the reflections. We used the equipment we were using for conference.
Right.
And we just hooked ourselves up to some lav mics, and we got like a little recording thing and hooked ourselves into that and pressed the button and let it rip. In fact, I think like the first 4 episodes, let's just talk about the first 4 pillars of fleet success. And then after that, we had no plan.
Yeah.
So if I have a takeaway, this is one of my takeaways as I was reflecting on 200 episodes. And my advice to you guys is just start. Right? If you have something you want to do, it doesn't have to be a podcast, but in Brent, in your case, is the podcast. If you have an initiative, you have something you want to do, the biggest obstacle to overcome is 0 to 1. It's just starting, right? There's a whole book, Guy Kawasaki has a book called The Art of the Start, and it's all about that first step, that getting over the inertia. Because once you take the first step, it's a lot easier to take the second and the third and the fourth. Now, I will tell you, I don't even know what the life cycle is of most podcasts. I want to say it's like 10, maybe 15 episodes, because it's just hard. It's hard to sustain.
We didn't know how long this would go when we started either.
No, we had no idea. Yeah. And we weren't recording. We didn't have any video equipment. We literally were just doing audio only. If I were to go back in time, I think I would change that. I would have done it like with a phone or something like that. There was way better tech we could have been using, but this is not my day job. So we just kind of figured it out as we went.
But I will say he's become kind of like, what's the word, aficionado, is that the right word? You know, he's now all of a sudden, he knows everything about cameras and microphones and all this other stuff.
It's really a curse, so don't do that. Don't go down the rabbit hole. Sitting here looking at like f-stops on lenses, I'm like, what is happening? All right, awesome question. Thank you, Brenton.
Thanks, Brent.
We should send you a shirt or something. Who else has a question? Something you'd like to see? Yeah, up here in the front.
And when I hand you the mic, say your name, say where you're from, and ask your question.
My name is Jorge Mejia. I'm from the city of La Mesa in San Diego. I see you guys' chemistry as friends. How long have you guys been friends, and how do you deal with hard situations like he's not doing the right thing or you're not doing the right thing, and how do you deal with that?
Can I try that
workers?
one first?
For sure. I was going to give it to both of you.
To be as honest as I can be, you know, Josh and I have maybe known each other 4 years now, 5 years. I met him a couple years before joining at a conference. I actually met him through Steve, because Steve and I had worked together. But we just, you know, sometimes in life you meet people who you kind of just hit it off with. We had a chemistry right away, you know, and he's my boss, but I do also consider him a friend. If he fired me tomorrow, I'd still call him and wish him Merry Christmas, kind of a thing, you know.
Not if I fired you tomorrow, because that would be a surprise.
Yes, yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah, but you get the point. So yeah, sometimes you just kind of hit it off with folks and you have a chemistry, and we've had that. I think we both have used the term like brother from another mother, and that's how it's felt, honestly. So that one I would say is a little bit of luck. I think we're passionate about similar things, and so maybe that helps as well. Steve I've known much longer. You know, I met him, he was doing a consulting study for the fleet I was running in New York City at Fordham University. And our relationship has changed over a year, right, from educator and mentor, and I still consider him that. I think he's the smartest fleet guy in the business. But we've really become great friends, and you bond over certain things, and then that enables sort of that trust to build and to just have very honest conversations. So we're that a little bit naturally, but then this guy, I mean, you've heard him speak all week. I mean, what you hear him say on stage about culture and about difficult conversations and that sort of a thing, he means it. When he hired me, the first thing he said was, I want you to always tell me the truth no matter what. Which is tough to tell your boss the truth sometimes, but he means it. And if he can sense that you're holding back, he'll come at you, right? So I already had a really good relationship with that. He has no hesitation telling us the truth, as you might imagine. So that's how we handle that. He just comes straight out. Hey, that sucked. Do better. And, you know, kind of have that conversation. Because it's never, again, that whole concept of assumed positive intent is really important. I think the three of us could say anything we wanted to each other and know that the intention was to help make us a little bit better, not to hurt somebody, right? And if you have that, because we all have had tough days. I've had tough days where I've gotten hurt, and he's looked me in the eye and said, come on, dude, right? And I had to kind of wake up and say, all right, yeah, I need to rethink that one, you know? And it happens, you know? But you move on and you keep rolling forward because you know people genuinely care about each other.
And that's the beauty of an intentional culture. I mean, that's what drew me here. I met Josh actually, gosh, I don't know, 5 to 7 years ago. I think we were at FleetCon, and I went to your booth and we talked, and I think it was FleetCon.
You were speaking at a session. I think it might have been GFX or FleetCon.
One of those two.
NAFA. It was at NAFA.
Was it that? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Every week gets blurry for me because I'm on the road somewhere. But, and that's where I first met Josh. But I'd heard of Ron Turley and I'd heard of RTA over the years because I'd been consulting for a long time. But until I actually met Josh, and then we actually kind of formed a relationship, and And then I decided to consider coming here. Josh invited me. It was that invitation and what he was doing was something I'd kind of done throughout my career, trying to create an intentional culture, not to the degree we are here at RTA, but I always believed that if you could be in control of your culture, then you could affect all the outcomes, in a positive way. And the beauty of the fleet management, I don't know if you guys have figured this out yet. Hopefully you have. We're a small little society. I tell people that if anybody ever asks me, give me a word of wisdom. I'm in the fleet community. What do you do? I just tell people, do not step on anybody's toes. Do not, as you're climbing the rung to success, do not stand on anybody's fingers. Because you never know when someone might be your boss at some point in time. Marc and I have gone in both roles over the time, where we've worked. He's now my boss. Before, I was above him. Yeah. So that's the beauty of culture. You don't step on anybody. And the fleet community is that way. I sit around the tables this week talking to different people, and somebody will say, you know this guy? Oh, yeah, I know that guy, We all know the same people. We run in the same circle, and it's actually kind of awesome if you think about it.
It is a really big extended family.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I'll answer one of the questions you had was how do we maintain that chemistry? And part of it is just how we get to know each other. As he said, like Marc and I, we've only known each other a few years. Steve and I have known each other a little longer. But for everybody that works for me, and this is a challenge, if you have people that report to you, I'll ask you a question, is do you know the names of their kids? Do you know the names of their spouse? Right? Do you know what's going on in their life? Like just last week, Marc and I were having a conversation about everything from marriage to philosophy to religion.
Yeah.
Like that's the level of conversations we're having. Maybe it's unprofessional, but that's a conversation that friends have.
Right.
And I will tell you, that's the type of relationship that I try to build with each of my employees. I know the names of all three of his kids. I know his wife's name. I know what's going on in their life right now. I used to remember Steve's kids' names, but it's been a while since he reported to me. But I remember, I'll ask him about Vicky, his wife. I'll ask him about, he's got 5 sons, and they're all, in different parts of the country and what's going on with each of them. So you have to kind of build those relationships and that chemistry that way. Is just to really get to know and care about your people. And when they get to that point, then they're like, all right, he knows me, he sees me, I feel seen by him, I can trust him. And that's where that chemistry really comes into play, is that we can bond in that way. So, and it doesn't help, or it doesn't hurt, you gotta grow a beard.
Yeah, you do gotta grow a beard, otherwise, but I just wanna kind of just quickly dovetail that, because I wanna be sure that what folks are hearing is he's not doing that, and he's not, like, we don't do that because, that's a good strategy. It's sincere. Like, he actually cares about what's going on in our lives, and vice versa. Like it helps to be people who care, like most, I think you are. I feel very blessed by who our customers are. And I think in general, in the industry, you have to be someone who genuinely cares about, the world and how you impact it. And if that's who you are, then when you do that, when you take Josh's advice, it's not just like a gimmick, you know what I'm trying to say? It's like you mean it, and it makes all the difference.
I had somebody come to me this week, they'd seen one of our podcasts, and I had made a comment about, I don't think there's bad employees, I just think they're in the wrong spot. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes there's bad bosses, but that resonated with them, and then throughout my career, I've always believed that, and I've had the kind truth conversations with employees, and are you in the right spot? Do you love working here? What can I do to help you get on the right bus, right? And so those kind of things that I've always been doing that we do here, and I truly believe that, everybody, I care about everybody I supervise or everybody I associate with, and because everybody has value,
Yeah.
All right, good question.
Great question, thank you.
Because no one goes to school for fleet management, chances are you were never formally trained on how to successfully lead a fleet. That's where the Fleet Success Playbook comes in. The Fleet Success Playbook is your guide to building a safe, reliable, and efficient fleet that provides exceptional service. Learn all about the 4 pillars of fleet success: stakeholder satisfaction, intentional culture, resource efficiency, and risk management. Get nearly 100 years of combined advice on common challenges, practical solutions, actionable tips, and real examples from fleet industry experts who have been there and done that. Visit www.fleetsuccessplaybook.com to request your free copy today.
say your name and where you're from.
Scott Gunner, City of Santa Fe. For the past week, you guys have been talking about intentional culture, and obviously I'm with the city and municipality. And with your intentional culture being a private company, that is probably a little bit easier to do than with a municipality or a government entity, because you've got people there that have been there for a long period of time, and they're going to be there for a long period of time, regardless of what you give them to do or how they're being reviewed. So I was wondering if you could just touch on the differences between your intentional culture and implementing that into a public sector type environment.
Yeah, so I get this question a lot, actually. Because there is this preconception is that, hey, well, you're the owner, you can do whatever you want. It's not true, right? I could do whatever I want, and then I can lose the loyalty of my people. I'd have to go out and rehire everybody. I can lose the loyalty of my customers, and that's the lifeblood and fuel of the organization, right? So there's definitely still constraints. Now, there might be rules, and you have, and this actually exists in Fortune 500 as much as it exists in government organizations. It's the same problem in both. Large, massive ships take a long time to turn. And sometimes it's difficult to figure out all the workings of the machine and who's at the helm of every single rudder, right? And so when I look at, let's say, public sector, there's still rules. There's still systems that they have in place. Now, mind you, are those systems built to protect the incompetent and the inept? I don't necessarily think that was their intention, and so I leverage that. Now, if that was their intention, that's difficult to work in, but I don't think that's the case. So what you do is you look for, how do I hold people accountable? That's ultimately what this all comes down to, right? Is ownership and accountability. When we define intentional culture, we say it's purposely shaping the type of environment you want in your fleet and then taking the ownership to make it happen. No excuses, right? What can you influence? What can you change? Right. What can you do differently? And you look for the areas that you do have some latitude. You find those boundaries, and then you go out a ring and you go find out from HR, like, well, how far can I go? Like, what are the things? What are the rules? What are the processes I have to go through to get rid of somebody that is a bad apple, that doesn't fit the values? And then you got to make sure, this is where I think we get this preconception is like, well, we can't hold people accountable in government because we can't fire them. Well, that's not true. You can fire people in government. You just have to go about it the right way. There's just a lot more red tape that you got to cut through. Okay, that's part of the process. And you go through the process. We have a whole conversation thing about uncomfortable conversations and things like that. I can go through the process faster, but I still have to obey the law. I can't go out and just because we're a right to hire, right to fire state, doesn't mean I can go and violate EEOC. Right. I can't go violate ADA, right? There are things that I still have to abide by, but I can move probably a little bit faster. Even though I can move faster, doesn't mean I should. In one of my sessions, I talked about how long it took us to replace the culture, right? And I went through this osmosis process to do it. It took 10 years to get to that point. I took over as CEO in 15. Here it is, 2025. And I think we're finally at the point that I'm like, yes. Like, I am checking all the boxes as we talk about people on the bus, that they're in the wrong seat or on the wrong bus. That list has gone down to, we've got 120 some odd employees, and I might have one or two that I've got concerns with right now. But that took 10 years to get to that point. You're in government, you got 10 years, you got time. That's self-inflicted, I guess, but the point is that there's still systems, there's still processes. You have more red tape to go through, but you still can go through that red tape if you want to.
I was actually creating intentional cultures before I knew what intentional cultures were. I mean, I worked in government and I worked in corporate and in
you did that at what, state of Utah and state of Georgia?
State of Utah, even just last week I was at a conference and I was meeting with several of my employees when I was in the state of Georgia. We still have that bond. They're still asking me about my family. I'm asking about their kids. We still have that, and I haven't been there since 2010. So that's what an intentional culture is. You can control your culture. You may not be able to control what's above you, but you can control what's below you. And have I fired people in unions? Yes. Have I moved people in unions to different positions they'd be more successful? Yes, I have. You can do it. You just have to commit to it. And it all comes down to what we talked about earlier. Get to know your people. What are their kids? How many dogs do they have? What are their interests? And once you get to that level, it becomes an unspoken kind of a communication, and the trust is built. I've had people that I've gone to unemployment hearings because I fired them. And as I left the hearing, they shook my hand and said, I really enjoyed working for you. I'm sorry that we can't continue. I've had those experiences in my life because we built that trust. And unfortunately, we had to separate ways. I had one guy that I fired I still talk to. It's like Marc said. You build those relationships, and they're lifetime relationships. So just because you're in government, don't think you can't do that. It is harder. You do have to document.
Well,
you have to do that as a private company too.
True.
Yeah.
That's
So
true.
I don't want to necessarily lean into
That's a
that.
great point.
It's, you're kind of free to do whatever you want. It's a wild, wild west. But
I had one stay where I had 3 unions I had to deal with. Yeah, 3 different unions I had some
different
mechanics in
CPAs.
one union, I had the parts guy in another union, and then half of my admin was in another union. You can do it. You literally can do it. We're all just people, and you just got to build that trust.
it does take a lot of work, though.
Yeah.
Right. So and I'm not going to downplay that at all. One of my other recommendations is pull HR in.
Right.
Like get to know your HR people really well, so they know you and they trust your judgment, and learn. Try to find out from them, like, what do they look for? What are things that, as they go through their process, how do you make sure that you're always coloring inside the lines? Because you don't want to get fired for going outside the lines. And if that's not a testament that you can get fired, if you can get fired, they can get fired. Now, I keep saying, like, you got to fire people. That's not how you get to accountability. You get to accountability first through this trust, and they got to know you care, and then you can have a kind conversation because it's what's best for them, and then ultimately it's what's best for the organization.
Right.
But I think without the teeth, it does become very difficult. You really have to, if anything, it actually makes it more imperative that you lead with love and lead with kindness, because you can't lead with fear and you can't lead with coercion. There's always got to be a balance between the two, but when this hand is tied and it's really hard to use, you've got to switch to the other hand. You got to learn how to switch hit, and really lean into that, and let your team, I talk about peer-to-peer accountability, let them become the champions, let them carry the torch, let them hold each other accountable. And then it becomes a much more interesting environment when people when they know they don't belong, they know they don't fit in, and they keep getting inspired to leave, and they self-select out, like, that's when you've got a really great thing, when you've got a really great culture. That's when people start self-selecting out. Because they're getting driven out. It's like you get an infection in your body. What does the body do? And it fires up the white blood cells. And the white blood cells all attack the virus, and they try to dispel it, right? They raise the temperature of the body collectively. It's not the brain doing that, right? The body fights itself. And so it's pretty awesome when you see your company and your team doing that. When you've made a mishire, you got somebody in that shouldn't have been in, and they rally around and say, whoa, red flag, we made a mistake here. We need to do something about this quick, right? Use that probationary period. Everybody has that, right? Use that with absolute judiciousness. And you're looking at everything, and you're surveying the team. How are they fitting in? How is it working? Right? That 60 days needs to be incredibly intentional. We script out the first 2 weeks of their onboarding. So that way they're totally indoctrinated in that first 2 weeks. And then if they get past that, then it's like you're in the role, you're doing the thing, and we're evaluating everything. How do you interact with your peers? Are you modeling the culture? Can you do the job, right? Or did we get sold a bill of goods? And no matter how long it took to fill the role the first time, if it's not the right fit, yank it. Yank that cord, because it's way harder to get rid of them a year from now than it is right now in the probationary period. So.
I just quick to emphasize their points. They've really said it all. But every time we've ever done a study and we've heard from a fleet manager, I can't get rid of these folks. I know that they're a problem. And then you go and you look deeper, and they haven't done the work. They haven't done the documenting. They haven't identified, well, this is how many hours that tech should bill, and they're not billing it.
The standards. They haven't set a standard yet.
Right. There are no performance reviews. There are no conversations and documented conversations. And just real quick, I think Josh kind of said it, but I really want to emphasize it is, you owe it to everyone else in the organization to weed out bad apples. If you allow them to spoil the bunch, you have failed in your responsibility as the leader. It's just that, in trying to not have a conflict here, you've hurt others. right? And I think that's a really important thing to understand. So by no means are we saying go around and start firing people. That's actually the last resort. The first resort is let's get on board. Let's see how do I motivate you? How do we get things going? But if you do get to that point and you fail to act, you actually, I mean, how many of you have been in a situation where there's a bad apple that spoiled the bunch, right? And when the bad apple left, even if they were a good worker otherwise, but they were just not good for the culture, the whole group did better. Has anyone experienced that? Okay, so most of you have, so you know it.
Yeah,
And they all look at you and they're like, why did that take so long?
well, I've actually had some where in state government where I've actually fired somebody, and then I got blowback. But I had kind of gone through, but the blowback was from other employees that thought they might be next, right? But all those employees, and when I had one-on-ones with them, wanted me to get rid of the one I got rid of. But then when we got rid of them, they went, oh, wait a minute. Oh, he can get rid of people.
What do they say about the, if you're running from a bear, you just got to be faster than the slowest person.
Yeah, right.
And when you cull the slowest person,
Yep.
now it means like, all right, well, the standard just got raised.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that you're not playing whack-a-mole sometimes in your organization, because through my career, I've always noticed when I got rid of the bad apple, there's always another one that might pop up, right? You got to whack that one too. But if you have an intentional culture, after a while, it starts to get a lot better as you go through that process. And a lot of it is the kind truth that Josh talks about. Don't be afraid to have those tough conversations. I've been doing that my whole life, and they suck. They sometimes.
But in the long run.
Yeah, but in the long run, they're good.
And I think your willingness to have really kind, clear, tough conversations speaks to your willingness to lead with love.
Yeah.
Like if you really truly care about somebody, you'll tell them the truth, and you'll speak it often and kindly, but you'll do it for their benefit, not for yours. That's when you really know you're getting to that point that you've got a good culture going. All right, let's do a couple more. We've got one up front and then right here.
Where are you from?
Hey guys, David Jaramillo, City of Santa Fe.
Dave.
So I just wanted to kind of wrap up with accountability and ownership, just like what you were talking about, and piggyback off of it, because earlier it was mentioned to lead with accountability, but with compassion as well. And so besides practicing the concept, I was really curious on where does one, like myself, learn these concepts, and how do you approach it and implement it to a team that it'll probably be a culture shock for them, that they're not used to it either. So does one have to have a prerequisite of establishing themselves in that kind of space and environment, or would this be one of those art of the start situations?
You guys want to take this one? Or you want
I think you go for that one.
So I actually was talking to somebody in the hall about this yesterday, is how do I start this, right? Do I just jump straight into having a hard conversation? No. But if that's your first foray into it, it's going to be a shock. Mm-hmm. We need to boil frogs, right? We got to turn the temperature up slowly. We don't need them jumping out of the pot and causing all kinds of mess elsewhere. So what do you start with?
That's a phenomenal analogy.
First one, it really is terrible. It is true. My first one is you've got to start with trust. You've got to build that vulnerability. You've got to build the connection first. You can get a lot tougher in your conversations when they know that you care about them, right? You can get a lot clearer, a lot more direct. What do I mean by that? So if I were to give you like, hey, here's 3 things, you want to learn about how to do this. My first one would be go read 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Go buy it on Audible today. Listen to it on the plane ride home. It's quick, it's fast, foundational book. That book alone, I will tell you, like that book changed the entire trajectory of RTA as a company. That one book. Now, I read a lot of books. I've said this before. I've got like a list of 50 if you want it. My assistant, Nikki, will send it out to you. But start with that one. Because that one is all about, like, it builds the trust. You get into the conflict, commitment, and then you can get to accountability where you have the hard conversation and you can start doing, exercises through that. There's trust building exercises that you build. We do a personal histories exercise at our shop. We do it every trimester, it seems like. We just learn about each other. We learn our stories, we learn our histories, and we get to see each other as humans. It's very difficult to have a hard conversation if you can't see the other person as a human and they don't see you as human. So that's the start. You have to have that foundation first. As far as like, hey, I know I need to have this conversation. You can start small, just go light. In fact, when we talk about the uncomfortable conversations framework, the first contact is usually very informal. It's just a simple like, hey, notice you're a little bit late coming in today. Everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. Okay. And that's it. Like, it doesn't have to be a big formal thing. And then the next time it happens, you just kind of raise the temperature a little bit. And then you raise the temperature a little bit, right? Like, you don't go 0 to 100 in one day. You just kind of slowly build it up. How quickly you build it up depends on how long you can tolerate that bad behavior. If it's really egregious, there's a massive safety issue, then you bring him in and you grab him by the collar and you be like, dude, I want you to live. I want you to go home. Never do that again. Never do that again. Do you understand me? Are you ever going to do this again? No, boss, I'm never going to do that again. Please, I want you to go home at the end of the day, right? Like, for the safety of everybody around you. And so you may have to increase the tone, but make sure the tone matches the intensity of the message.
Right.
But unless it warrants it, don't jump straight into it. Just address the behavior slowly by surely, and then you build up the intensity as you notice that they're not responding and you're not getting the response and the improvement that you're expecting to see. And then you're just ratcheting up the clarity and you're saying, hey, I know we've talked about this a couple of times, but it doesn't seem like you're getting the message. What I'm seeing is this. Are you seeing the same thing? Do you understand where the standard is and how you're kind of below the standard? I really need you to see you improve by this date. Are you in agreement with me on this? Do you think I've been fair in this process? I love that F word, by the way. It's not my first favorite F word, but it's definitely my third or fourth. But you use that one, right? Like, am I being fair with you right now? And you want them to say yes. And that means you've been super clear and kind in this accountability process. Until you get to the point that you're like, I just don't see a future for you here anymore. You get to that level of clarity with somebody, I am really concerned, and I've done this with people, I'm really concerned about your future here at RTA. In fact, like, I'm not sure that this is the right company for you. And if I were in your position, I would already be looking for another job. You could imagine, like, if your boss came in and had that level of clarity after talking to you and talking to you and talking to you, what would be your next move? Right? Even if they're not putting you on probation yet, but you hear that type of tone from your boss, do you know where you stand? Yeah, you know where you stand.
That or you're
like,
dumb as doornails.
There's no ambiguity here, unless you are totally blind to it. And I've had people like that too. And then you go into the formal probation process. But you don't start at the top. You just kind of work your way up. Unless the situation really is life and death and you really need to, like, shake them awake. Don't grab them by the lapels. You will get hit with HR for that. But, figuratively and, like, if you got to get in their face, there's nothing wrong with that either. Like, your tone should match the intensity of the issue. So,
I think a good start is to be present with your employees, always. I mean, I went into a small gig, and I was only there for 5 months. First time, when I first arrived, I sat down with every single employee, and I talked to them. What are your likes, your dislikes? How do you like your job? What are you doing? What's your family like? I mean, I go through all that. There's a genuineness that comes from that. And I'm not doing it to manipulate people. I actually do care about people, because you cannot, worry about accountability and ownership until you know. Okay? And once you do that, then I find that people are most generally people care, unless they've been driven to a point where they don't. Then you start getting into competitiveness and things like that. You get common goals. You work towards those common goals. Nothing is more exciting when someone in your organization accomplishes something that you've set out for them to do. We call those OKRs in our organization, or the goals and objectives. And then if you accomplish that as a team and the whole team rallies around and does that, then it's exciting. You go through reward systems and you go through celebrations. And when you go through that, you become a cohesive team.
You bond.
You bond. And you can do that in government. I've done it. I can testify to that. But always be present. I remember when I was getting my master's degree, there was this anecdotal story about this great supervisor that left this organization. They brought this Harvard guy in, and he had all the credentials and all the credibility, but all of a sudden everything went down the tubes, went to crap. And so they went back to the employees and they asked them, well, what was the difference? This guy had more qualifications than the other guy. He said, well, that guy was always present. He would walk out on the floor and he would talk to us. He had a rag in his hand and he'd wipe off my tools, and he would ask me how my day was and how my weekend was. The other guy sat in the office doing strategy all day. So that's what I would tell you. Be present with your employees. Let them know you're in their life. You care. You know, be helpful, be a servant leader. Those are the things that matter.
All right, we've got time for one last question, and then we're going to wrap this up. Oh man, look at all these 3 questions.
All right.
So I'll say this before we get this last question. If you have a question, and if you have a question any time in the future as you listen to the podcast, we love taking questions on air. So email us, podcast@rtafleet.com. Email us at any time. It goes to the 3 of us and maybe a couple other people, and we'll get that onto the agenda, and we'll answer that. Like, we'll spend a whole episode just talking about that one topic. So if you do have questions and we didn't get to it, podcast@rtafleet.com.
Craig, Knoxville. Everything, we all agree everything is top down. It starts with you and how you want your culture, and you bring it down. But we're here, and there's probably not a whole lot of us that are at the very top ownership.
Yep.
I want to know if you have strategies when you're in the middle to change the culture upwards.
Ooh, managing up.
Yeah, tough one.
So I'll say the first thing, and then I'm going to kick it to you two, because I've never had to manage up. I was an employee for 10 years and couldn't change my own culture, so that was fun. The first thing is control what you can control. Right? It's kind of like I was saying earlier, is you have to just start with your environment. And what I have seen is that when we can really make our thing amazing, people start looking in and saying, what are you doing there? Like, what's going on there? There's something in the air, right? What's different about your organization? What are you doing differently? And what can we learn in other organizations? How do we, like your managers will see that, because you'll be delivering results. You set the vision, build a team, deliver results. And when you're hitting all your results and you're winning awards, people start paying attention. That's the first piece. But I'll let you two answer, like, hey, how do you communicate this up to, like, if you're in a city and maybe you report to the public works director, how do you get that to go up? From there, maybe you go to the city manager, maybe you're in the finance department. How do you get that to roll up? Strategies or advice on how you talk to people?
Well, first of all, I would say this, then I'll tell you how I do it. Know when to fold them and know when to walk away, okay? I've walked away from 2 great jobs in my career, and basically my wife about screamed at me because I literally said, I'm not working there because I can't manage up in this organization. So, I walked away from 1 job, great salary, 5 kids, car payments, house payments, and basically landed on nothing. So you need to be able to say, okay, I'm there, okay? And it's scary as heck, and this is not great. But how I managed up is I always had a plan. I didn't go into any year, any week, any month without a plan, okay? That's first and foremost, have a plan. When you have plan, you have goals and objectives, and then I report on my plan, and I report up. And Coca-Cola, great example. I got promoted within weeks because I had a plan. People don't make plans. I'm amazed when I do consulting, and I'll ask that question. Do you got a plan? What are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do this week? What's your goals for the year, right? So make a plan and report on it. And when you hit those successful milestones, people notice, just like Josh said. People notice. So that's my first bit of wisdom, is make a plan.
Yeah, and he does that, by the way. He means it very literally. But it does start, I think, with a few things. Being successful is important. And when you're successful, it's hard to take that away from you, right? It's an objective score. But I think something that we talked about earlier was, lead by example, right? So as I think both Steve and Josh said, you can control that culture below. I think you got to be a little bit careful not to be too much of a shield. Maybe it's an umbrella, but the rain hits, it slows down, but it still falls, right? Because if you have a bubble, that's no good either. You actually want your team to be a reflection of the culture that you're building, and it help to exuberate outwards. But if you're consistent, right, in who you are, and you don't let whatever the negativity that might be around you change who you are, which is very difficult to do, and we all have our bad days, but you need to establish, this is the culture I'm going to live in, and this is my mindset, and I'm going to rinse and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. And what I have found is that it sort of works its way outward. And both the success, it's impossible not to notice a group of people having success and seem genuinely happy to do it. And so my experience, at my fleet stop was, Again, I don't, like Steve referenced, we were doing some of this without knowing it, and I think that's part of why we were such a good fit. We weren't sort of, following a playbook per se, but we had values, and we had rules, and we had performance. This is the standards. This is what we expected of each other. And so we did really well, and we were very happy doing it. And people took notice, and they started to ask. And it wasn't always up. The stairway to the top wasn't straight. First it was a colleague, a neighboring department, let's say, and they said, hey, how are you doing that? What's going on over there? And at the time it was like, well, this is it. We used to say things like, we're the type of people, we do what's right for what's right's sake. We need no other reason, right? We tell the truth, right? And we have each other's back, and we pick up for each other, right? And we used to talk about those things. And when we hired, we'd say, if that's not you, that's okay. No hard feelings. But you don't belong here, so please don't spoil this well. And we would be very blunt with people. If you're the type of person to miss a shift and not call to say, hey, something's going on, I'm sorry, and you're just gonna not show up, we don't want you here, right? And so it would start with things like that. And then we would just be very honest, and we would do well. And we would never stop until we were doing better and better and better. And the next thing you know, there's colleagues on my left and my right who are adopting some of these same ideas in the departments that they're working on. And now it's growing, and now it's almost becoming sort of an organic movement sort of a thing that leadership can't help but notice. And so by the time I was leaving the university, they were asking me to come and work in divisions and departments that had absolutely nothing to do with fleet or transportation, because they were more interested in trying to get that approach in to how we were getting so much out of our students and out of our graduate students and out of our employees. And so I think that's a big key. I agree with what Steve said. You do got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. I think there's something to that. But I also would urge people, that's not step one, right? That's right. I've done everything I could. I've seen this as far as I can get it. And now we're no longer making momentum and making change. And then that might be a good sign that, hey, maybe it's time to do something else.
Or you're being actively held back.
Yeah, right. It's a good example. Yeah, good point.
And one-on-one conversations are a must with your upper leadership, even if you have to force those.
Right.
I mean, I've had conversations. Well, I'll give you a good example at Coca-Cola. We had the 6 Ps. Those were our goals. None of those fit fleet, except for maybe sustainability. So I had to create different channels to meet those 6 goals. So I sat down with my boss and I said, I think this P means this, this P means that. What do you think? And I got consensus. And then that was my plan. And then I went forward. So, don't be afraid to talk to your supervisor. Don't be intimidated.
Right.
They're looking for that kind of feedback. And even if you have to force it sometimes because they're so busy, make time for it.
Yeah, one last strategy I've seen work, Tom Volt over at South Jordan did this. We present all the time on this stuff. So I remember I was given a presentation on intentional culture at NAFA, and he brought his boss to NAFA. His boss was the public works director, saw my session, and then invited me out to come speak to his entire public works department. Right. And so Tom made sure that he had heard something of me, because Tom had seen my stuff and was like, I want to do this, but I need to get my boss on board. And so he introduced him to some of that stuff. You can give him, like, hey, I read this really amazing book. I know you're kind of into this thing. Maybe you'd like it, right? And you can kind of go around that way as well. But yeah, you can have me come and speak to the entire public works team, not fleet at all. In fact, I think only Tom was the only fleet guy in there. Everybody else was utilities or sewer or something like that. But every one of their managers, and we did the whole presentation again for them, spent 2 or 3 hours with those guys. So that's the kind of you just got to plant a little seed and then water it, but don't flood it, let it grow.
Yeah, I got to make a quick shout out because I think I see Amanda Wilson in the audience there. Yeah. So, Amanda went to some of your sessions even before I got to RTA, and she started to try to apply this intentional culture. A few years later, I'm presenting with her, and she's got data. She's showing the efforts that she made to improve her culture and how that's impacting the performance of her mechanics. So, real quick, got to include data because there's no
speak their language.
You got to speak their language, and there's no escaping the truth, right? In that scenario, and that'll help you really influence the top when you can speak their language. All
right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Fleet Success Show. Thank you guys all for participating. We love you all. That's why we do it. We talk about the podcast all the time. Why do people do this podcast? We never talk about RTA. If we do, it's just as an aside of like, oh yeah, that's something we do, or this is how we handle it. but it's not a big product pitch. It really is just solving fleet problems with fleet professionals. And so it's been an amazing privilege to be a part of that. And I look forward to the next 200 episodes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
We hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on LinkedIn or leave a review. Want to learn more about our fleet management software, Fleet 360? Check us out at rtafleet.com. If you want to learn more about having your fleet evaluated by our consulting team, go to fleetconsulting.com.